coaches. Today, before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, CoachPad. No matter if you draw scout cards by hand or use a program on your computer, the CoachPad will give you back time by never stuffing a binder again before heading out to practice. First 13.3-inch electronic device allowing coaches to clearly display scout cards outdoors in the sun has been a game changer for programs this past fall and those currently planning all across the country. This new technology allows coaches to coach and not the monotonous task of stuffing and dealing with binders on the practice field. Check out the CoachPad and CoachPad Mini on thecoachpad.com. Please make sure you check out our sponsors, our affiliates, and here is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have Tyler Manus. I made sure we got this pronounced correctly. Really a free agent coach right now, a former high school defensive coordinator who we'll see what he does in the next couple weeks, probably after this debuts. But Coach, how you doing? How's it going for you?
Real good. Yeah, real good. Real good to finally talk to you and meet you and get on the podcast, talk a little ball, talk a little life. Yeah, I am in free agency. You know, I'm sure you'll see in a couple month or two, Adam Schefter will announce my name on Twitter and it'll blow up. Probably not. Probably not though. Maybe.
No. You know, hey, at worst, it will probably be on Football Scoop. So let's I mean,
I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll all take a Football Scoop post. So, but for those, for anybody who's the offensive coaches who don't know you, and for the random like 4 defensive coaches who've lived under a rock for the past couple of years, you want to kind of give your background, kind of how you end up, kind of where you most recently were at, and then before you kind of, I don't know how I'll say this, kind of decided to move, pretty much really when you were having a lot of success.
Yeah, so I've actually only been coaching football for 2 years. I played college football in Columbus, not at Ohio State, at Capital. When I moved back down, had some injuries, moved back down, ankle surgery, whole shebang. Still stayed in contact with football, studied it just, really as a fan, like got super into fantasy. I was that guy that had 10 fantasy leagues, missed the game a ton. Funnily enough, we had an alumni like flag football game at my old high school, and I came like strapped with wristbands and play cards and everything like that. And the head coach was there. I was like, "Hey, do you want to coach football again?" I was like, "I'll see if I can find the time," but like, yeah, absolutely. So it just kind of snowballed into me being a first-year football coach, first-year defensive coordinator. His only stipulation was to run a 3-4. So, the first thing I turned to was, Aranda, Wisconsin, and at LSU. So coaching at my alma mater, they were not good. Program's only ever had one winning season. It's a small private school, like 300 kids in the high school, 2A Southwest Florida football. They had given up 46 points per game the year before I came. The first year we gave up 30, and then this past year we had the best defense in program history. Second winning season in program history, we gave up 13 points per game and like 1.5 points per possession. So yeah, we kind of snowballed, did some really good things. Not everything went perfect as it ever does, but we did lead in every game, and that was really big. Came up short in a couple close games, couple big games against rivals and things like that. But really happy. Love this school. If I was still going to be in the area and I wasn't getting moved, I would have stayed there again. I love this school. Just kind of getting married, moving to Chattanooga, and that's why I'm a free agent.
I get it, Coach. And you mentioned Capital there. What was it like? Kind of playing at Capital. Capital is I don't know, for those who don't know Ohio Division III football. Capital is a very interesting place. It's a very good academic school. But what was that kind of experience like?
It was funny. So my dad's side of the family is from Columbus, so we grew up Buckeye fans. And so growing up, all I said is, I want to go play college football in Ohio. I don't care if it's at a D3 school. So I looked at I looked at Denison, I looked at Ohio than those D3 schools. And in Florida, if you don't know, there's really not any D3 schools. They're all kind of Division One, a couple D2 schools like Southeastern and Warner and things like that. So I almost had to go out of state anyways. Luckily enough, the school that kind of offered me the most money, academic wise and everything, that was Capital. And I love that because it's like right on the same street as Ohio State. Funnily enough, though, it was kind of bizarre because you're 18, 19, and you play a game at noon, and Ohio State would play a night game. So you go buy tickets to a night game. So you would play a college football game, win or lose, and then go watch kids your age go play college football at the Big Brother down the street. And when you tell people, oh, I'm from around here and I play college football, they're like, oh, you go to Ohio State? No. I go to Capital. No, right down there in Bexley. So it's a little bit different, but I had a lot of fun there.
Good. Yeah, I've had a buddy who graduated in the early '90s who I've coached with who played at Capital, and they seem to have a lot of like former coaches, all coaches who played there, who end up being pretty good coaches. I'll rephrase it that way. So I think it's got kind of a weird high school pipeline in itself. Unfortunately, I mean it's not been as successful as it's wanted to be. But I mean, for people who listen to this, and this might immediately cause people to turn this off, but we're not going to talk a lot of the tight front today. I will sorry to burst a lot of people's bubble. This man has 18,000 other clinics and hours that you can find the tight front on. So that's one promise I made him literally within the past hour. But you mentioned there studying Coach Aranda, who, I mean, let's just be honest, is one of the best defensive minds in college football right now. I mean, even I get his defense maybe not have been what it was that year they won the national title, but it was still pretty efficient. And then this year at Baylor, it was pretty good. Why did you choose to start with Coach Aranda? And then kind of what did you obviously the tight front stuff, but what did you pull from that? What kind of learning experience was that for you?
Yeah, it was really two things. When I watched the film, they based out of Under, so they obviously had the interior B gaps open. So teams just ran a ton of zone stuff, and they just got ate up. So that was like one of the first things. Was like, all right, how are we going to defend the run? How are we from an odd base going to close the interior gaps? So in my mind, when I heard 3-4, kind of I had two choices. I could go the traditional like slant and angle 3-4 that probably most high schools run, where you're just you're an Okie front, your head up, and then you're slant over, slant under, or pinch and B gaps. That was one way. The other way, and this was when Aranda was hot, and being an Ohio State fan, admiring kind of Wisconsin football from afar. I kind of recognized like, hey, they play stingy defense, and they don't have the same 5 stars that Ohio State had. So recognizing that, just watching Wisconsin as a fan. So that's really where I went to initially, just to be, I don't know if it was just being different. It was kind of, what the school had seen, the offenses, how they were playing us beforehand. And then kind of, it was like right at the rise of Aranda. So that's instantaneously kind of what I gravitated to. I, found the playbooks, contacted Bass, was like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. Teach me this. And we kind of ran with it.
Yeah. I forget. Do you remember where he was before Wisconsin? He had some job.
He was at Utah State.
That's
yeah, he ran the tight front there as well.
Yeah, I couldn't remember where he'd been before. I know he had some success before that. But you mentioned something very interesting right there that I think, I don't know, gets ignored in today's 3 high safety shell look. Defending the run. Why was that such a priority to you? And then when you did your research, what did you kind of learn about defending the run?
So initially, because I played at this school, so I kind of knew the area. Southwest Florida puts out great backs. Right now, Lehigh has the #1 running back in the nation for the class of 2023. We get guys like Ernest Graham coming through, and Carlos Hydes from Southwest Florida. So we get a ton of backs. So it's kind of, Southwest Florida is known for producing running backs and running the ball great, and it's even in the private schools it's kind of the same thing. And we play a bunch of public schools as well. That's also great at running the ball. So had to be able to defend the run. really came down to, we were going to be undersized going into most games. My D linemen were typically, 5'7" to 6', 210 to 240. 240 is pushing it, honestly. So, more wrestler type bodies. So really, we had to come at it from a different angle. We couldn't just plug gaps, like kind of Aranda what Aranda did at LSU with some big bodies. We didn't have any SEC bodies or anything like that. So kind of had to attack it from a different perspective. I said what I said was, if we're going to match up anywhere on a Friday night, it's probably going to be speed. That's about the only place we're going to match up. We're never going to be size wise. We're never going to match up at speed on the back end. I think we'll be fine on the back end. And, we have a bunch of wrestler types who can tackle, are physical, can run a bit, not like super fast, but, just fits us. So spilling the ball was the biggest thing, which once again led me back to the tight front, closing those interior gaps, forcing the ball to roll off the shelf, and then tackling and pursuing, running, that sort of thing. So that's really another thing that led me to the tight front instead of the slant ankle stuff, was just trying to use, our kids, what benefited them the most. And it worked out.
Okay. Now, I mean, you mentioned, actually, I'll go this way first. What did you kind of learn from, obviously you improved that first year.
Mm-hmm.
But what did you learn from year 1 to year 2? Like what was your big takeaway in terms of the off season, in terms of what you did wrong, in terms of what needed fixed, how you could improve? What was your kind of focus there?
Yeah, the couple things that offseason. That season was big. We did get better. 30 points per game obviously isn't great, but reducing it down from 46, that was a big first step. We also returned a bunch, especially in the front seven. What I learned was you can't take someone's playbook and expect to run it at a high level. The why behind things, you don't get that from a playbook. It doesn't explain that underneath, type 4 or wizard 4. So really asking guys, watching film, asking guys that do the system more, why when did Aranda run this? When did he like it? What's a 12 personnel call? What's 11 personnel call? What's a 20 personnel call? What does he like in the counter? That sort of thing. That was big into the off season. Now, the first season was great because we got, 65, 70% zone scheme. And we were really good against the zone scheme when we were in tight. I think when teams ran zone scheme against us, they averaged like 3 yards per carry less than they did when they ran gap scheme. So, that was like a pat myself on the back kind of thing. But at the same time, when teams ran off tackle and run gap scheme, we struggled. And I think they averaged like 7 yards per carry or something like that, something way too much. But luckily, the first year, people didn't know we were really a tight-based team. I was still, not well known or anything like that in the area. So I kind of had a year to gather up, and that was my goal. That was my only mission. I didn't install a new coverage. We didn't put in any match coverages or, 3-match or cover 7 or rip blitz or anything like that in the off season. Kept the back end the same and said, all right, what do we have to do to continue to stop the run? And that's what we'll put our hat on, and we'll just play ball in the back end. And that's really where the system took off. I think, this year, instead of seeing 70% zone scheme, we actually saw 70% gap scheme because teams got the hint. But teams average almost less than 3 yards per carry against us. I think overall, it didn't matter if it was zone or gap. And that's where the studying came in. It was like, okay, this odd spacing and tight spacing stuff is good into some things, but it's really bad into some things. You get soft edges. So the answer for Randa and for me as well was just playing under or playing even spacing so you get those hard edges. Now you can do that 20 different ways. You can do that pre-snap. You can step to a pre-snap. You can do it post-snap by slanting, full line slant. You can do it with just a strong 4-eye. You can do it with gap inserts. You can do it with getting run-throughs. There's a lot of different ways to play under post-snap. But that's really where it took off because, we have our zone stuff. That's just tight. That's really easy. Now, what's our second step? What's our counter punch when teams come out in gap scheme? And that's really kind of where the system took off.
Okay. Now you mentioned another thing there, game plan. I had a conversation today with a guy I really respect who's been on my channel, a very good defensive coordinator who knows his stuff. And we had that conversation today where there's no secrets anymore. Like, cause we were talking about speaking at our local association and he kind of ripped into people last night during our recruit night. Like, if you get asked to present because everybody knows and their brother knows what you do. There ain't no secrets anymore. He's like, what it really comes down to nowadays is data and game planning and play calling. He's like, that's what matters. It's like, how do you adjust to this, or how can you hide to this? I mean, I had a whole separate conversation with another coach today about how when they did their self-scout season, like it's pretty obvious on what they were going to do, given all what like one or two kids did. They found their weakness essentially. What are your thoughts on play calling? What are your thoughts on how you prep for that? I mean, what do you look at when you're talking in-game play calling?
Yeah, it's funny. He told people just to present, and people kind of get like kind of shy about presenting. I had like 3 offensive coordinators tell me they bought my course in preparation for our game, and I'm pretty sure all 10 did, just because we literally got different offenses of the week based off of what we scouted and what they came out in. So it's kind of funny, which is fine. This is our best year, and I put it in that course. So well, I'm fine with the results now. Talking about play calling is really interesting because we just had that huddle thing, and I talked about play calling this week a little bit, and I think play calling is the great equalizer. It's really hard, and I've asked this question 100 million times on Twitter and talked to really, really smart people. I'm like, all right, how do I become a better play caller? And almost all of them just say, you have to get the experience. And I didn't like that answer. And I still don't like the answer, but there is a lot to that. It's hard to make up for seeing offenses over and over again. A lot of times in the first 2 years, seeing split back veer, seeing 21 personnel, seeing a 12 personnel team, seeing 10 personnel RPO stuff, it's my first time seeing that in person. And there's a difference between seeing it on the whiteboard and a difference between seeing it midway through the second quarter when you're down by 14. It's really, really different. So, a lot of times it's great, and I kind of like to hang my hat a little bit on the second half to where I can kind of like compartmentalize the first half and gather myself. I'm like, okay, this is what they're doing. And this is like what the whiteboard clinic version of what I should do. Let's try that in the second half. And a lot of times it works out, but it's really hard to do that in game. Really, really hard to do that, especially kind of on a smaller staff. It's always great to have that box guy in your ear that's like, all right, hey, they're doing this, based off of what we know, we should go to this. But even knowing that, play calling as an experienced play caller, it's hard. A lot of it is emotional maturity. I found that out. We didn't play in many big games last year just because we weren't up to snuff. This year, we played in a couple big games. We played our 2 district rivals, and they were to get into the playoffs, and they were both, had 1 or 2 losses, and we had 1 or 2 losses. We were ranked in the top 10 in the area. They were really good. They had D1 commits, and I thought I was fine emotionally, and I'm like watching it, I was like, oh, I'm not fine. I was not fine in the moment. Just that experience, when they go up by 21, it's 21-7, and they just scored, and your all-star middle linebacker just got driven into the end zone. Like, what do you tell that kid? That's not something anything can prepare you for. It's just not. But it's important. It's important, and it matters. And a lot of that is experience. Now, for the young guys that are listening to this, there is a way to bridge that gap, and the way you bridge that gap is probably vulnerability and a lot of self-scout, a lot of studying. So if you can war game all off season, and say for a month you're like, okay, I know I have a split back veer on my team, offense on my schedule. Well, for a month I'm just going to study the split back veer. That will translate into the season. It will. It's not as big of a jump as someone who's coordinated 10 years and has played a split back veer team 10 times in a row. It's not, but it does bridge the gap. And the more that you can do from Saturday to Thursday and kind of take the emotion out of it and the feel out of it, the bigger. So if you can just like compartmentalize what you're seeing on the field, and then look at your call sheet, understand what your calls do, the why behind your calls, and get to that, that's how you bridge that gap, in my opinion.
Okay. And you mentioned a couple things there that I kind of want to hit on and come back to. First, your box guy. Now, and this is where I think I struggled this year as a head coach and kind of asking what I needed out of the box guy. Because I've spent about half my career in the box, the other half on the field. And when you're in small staffs, I mean, you get what you get in the box. But doing it for 2 years, is there something specifically you asked them to look for, or how much did that change from year 1 to year 2, what you wanted from your box guy? What was your kind of box guy's role for you?
So the first year we didn't have a box. We had a box guy, but there was only like a staff of 4. So he was really, there's having a box guy and there's having a box guy. If your box guy is doing the offense and defense and special teams, Is he your box guy? Probably not. He's pretty much just like giving you the down and distance in hash. Whereas, if you have your guy up there and you're talking to him between the series, that's a big difference. Because I had that the second year, we had a guy come in, really smart, Jaden. Shout out to Jaden. And he was my box guy. He had played college ball, loved defense and things like that. And he was just there to talk defense. So, not so much really during the series. It's hard. It's really hard in series. But between series, it's really big. For example, week 11, last game of the season, we scouted a 10 personnel team. They were a 10 personnel spread team. We thought they were going to throw the ball 40 times. They came out in 21 personnel, tackle over unbalanced. And I am so bad at seeing stuff on the field. That's another thing I realized the first time I called a game. I was like, dude, I can't see anything. This just looks like a bunch of hogwash. I cannot tell what the crap is going on. I'm still not great at telling what's going on the field. It took me like 2 series to figure out, like, oh crap, they're in tackle over unbalanced. Like the first time they came out of it, I was like, oh, they're missing a dude. Like our safety was over like the guard, and I was like, dude, there's 10 people on the field. What are they doing? And then second play, oh, this is different. This is different. So having the box guy, to kind of be in my ears, like, okay, they're tackle over unbalanced. We have to declare a new center. Now let's get to under. So we have a 5 tech to the strong side because they're running power off tackle, and you kind of get into that rhythm with that guy. So this is something I struggle with as coaching coaches. But if you can make it like almost written on paper, like these are your 5 jobs. I want the down distance, the hash, and then try and look at huddle sideline and see what formation and what they're running, and then tell me what they did the play before. And then when the defense comes off, give me a quick breakdown of what they ran. They ran power 5 times to the tight end. They ran GT counter 3 times on second down, whatever it is, just to see if you can pick up trends. So try to take the thinking out of it in the moment and give them like really set in stone rules of what you want them to do.
Okay. You also mentioned kind of you got the flavor of the week because obviously when you have material out there, people watch it. I love like when I look at my YouTube and I see a video has suddenly jumped 75 views this week during the season. I'm like, well, somebody's playing somebody. It like that it's hilarious. But how did you adjust or prep for that? Because obviously my more passions personally is defensively. Especially after this year calling offense, that made it more apparent to me that I prefer defense than offense. But how did you prep for that? Because that's always an interesting thing when you've practiced all week, you've scouted, you've seen multiple weeks of film, you expect X, Y, Z, and you might have a backup plan for option like G, but then they come out in something completely different. What was that adjustment like? What was your mentality? What was that like for you?
For me and my staff and my kids, we would get like fired up over it. When they came out in 21 personnel or 20 personnel, we would get fired up. We would tell our kids like, hey, they aren't sticking to their guns. We've been through this before. This is week 5, and the past 4 teams have been doing the same thing. Like, we've been through this before. Let's just adjust. We're not doing anything crazy. We practiced all the same calls. We just have to get to a different part of the call sheet. And that's something I didn't understand, before I coached. You always think like, for some reason, when you're a fan, you think adjustments are like some magical thing that the coach pulls out of his butt and he writes up on the stand. He's like, oh my God, they're in 21 personnel. Let's do this magical play that we've never practiced. No, it's just you get to a different part of your call sheet, and you've practiced all of that. You installed all of that. It's not something crazy. So we loved it. And it's really nice when an offense does that. And it's really, really, it's even better. First 3 series, if you get 2 or 3 stops, those first 3 series, what the 4th series is going to be. It's going to be their base offense that you practiced against, right? So they're going to try whatever the wrinkle is. You stop the wrinkle, they're going to go back to base. That's what you prep for. So now you're kind of 3 steps ahead. And a lot of times, in my opinion, most teams don't get to the 3rd step. There's just clock runs out, game's over. If your offense is scoring touchdowns every other drive, they're down, it's 21-0 really quick. By the time you get to the 3rd step, you're probably into the 5th or 6th series, close to around halftime. So it's nice. Now, if you can't figure out what their first adjustment is and you're scrambling, it's kind of rough. But luckily for like the tight front thing, the story is pretty much always the same. It's always going to be plus personnel, so 20 personnel, 11 personnel, 12 personnel, and then they're all going to run off tackle gap scheme. They're going to try to pick off your backside inside linebacker. because you have a soft edge. So it's pretty much just like it's just the same. You put a different bird call sheet, you play under. It's kind of that weird circle of life. So luckily, a lot of the offenses of the week were just the same thing, just a different way. So one team was 11 personnel; they came out 11 personnel and ran power. Some team came out in 20 personnel and ran GT counter. Whatever it was. It's mostly just the same thing, and that's what you kind of learn the longer you do this. Is like a lot of the concepts are kind of the same thing. It's just done different ways.
Yeah. Now, you also mentioned earlier kind of prepping Saturday through Thursday. What is your typical Saturday through Thursday look like? I mean, we talked off screen about how once you get into something, you're all the way in. Like there is no in between for you. So what is your typical week of a typical football week look like for you?
So Saturday, and this is probably going to even sound fake, but when you're on like a really small step, I did all the QC work for my defense. So I did ODK, I did hatch, I did everything, opponent scout, everything, grading, all that. So Saturday I was just like in survival mode. One, I had to self scout and I had to watch the previous night's game so that we could talk about it on a staff on Sunday. So that was the most important thing. And then I just wanted to get all the raw information dumped in. So all the down and distance, ODK, I wanted to get that done for all the games that they gave us. That was the most important thing on Saturday, and then watching us. So Sunday was a little bit different. We obviously talked about as a staff, discussed the game, discussed the game plan. The game plan wasn't 100% in always at that time. Um, really, the goal of Saturday was to talk to the staff, and the big thing I did on Sunday was I would record voiceovers. So I got frustrated after my first year of positions not exactly getting communicated to, or they just weren't doing what was supposed to be taught. And I didn't blame the kids because it was me as a coach, as a first time coordinator, not coaching my coaches well enough. So as a micromanager, I kind of just like, okay, I can't be everywhere at once. Like I figured that early on, I can't be everywhere at once. During individual, I can only be with the outside backers, and I hate that. So what I'm going to do instead is do 6 hours of voiceover. So I did a voiceover for every position group during Sunday. Typically ran to half hour, 45 minutes. And that was huge. And the kids loved that. So what we would do during the voiceover is we would watch the game, and we would discuss the game. And that gave me a chance to like really break down. I think the biggest thing was like early on when we're a react attack, we play react attack and attack react up front. So, our D linemen have two ways of playing their technique. So, it's really hard to get your kids to play react attack if they've never seen it. So that was what we did the first week. I went over like, you guys are going way too far upfield. You got to play lock, peek, and shad, da 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 da. And then I would show them Wisconsin film. So I would show them the all 22 from Wisconsin. Like, look how TJ Watt or whoever it was doing lock, peek, and shed. A lot of times it wasn't TJ, it was like someone small. I'm like, look, they're running this. This is type 4. This is literally our base defense. It's just the next level. But this is perfect scheme because we get the end zone view and everything like that. That would be the second part of the voiceover. And then the third part is we would obviously get kind of into the game plan. It would give me a chance to watch film with kids. And we would do that. The biggest thing was it saved us time on Monday. So I wouldn't watch my film on Monday at all. We would just watch the offense a bit and we would go straight out. It would save us about 20 to 30 minutes on Monday, which is big when you're a two platoon team. Every minute matters because we only get typically I only get like 3 or 4 team D periods, so 15 minutes is a big deal. And then Monday through Tuesday is really when I'm trying to hammer down on what the offense is doing, why they're doing it. Wednesday kind of review, and then Thursday we're kind of onto it.
Yeah, that's great, Coach. I mean, I just took about half a page of notes. So, what? Hey, you're bad as we were this year. You got to find a way to improve. That's why you talk to smart people. Now I struggle with this every year, and you mentioned I think a little bit of it, but I want to get more in depth in it. And whether I've done offense or defense, what does install look like for you? How do you approach that? I mean, obviously there's the South is a little different because they have spring ball that we don't have yet up here. Unfortunately, that's knock on wood being worked on. I'll believe it when I see it, though. A part of our problem is baseball doesn't start till almost March here because of weather. But how do you approach install? How do you What's your pacing look like? Where do you start coverage wise, front wise? How does that process work with you? Obviously, there's some are 7-on-7, so you have stuff for that too. What is your approach for install?
Yeah, so when I played at the school that I coached at, we installed every week up until week 10 or week 11, whatever it was. We installed literally a whole new, brand new concept, new fronts, new pressure packages, new everything. Um, and that was the norm for me. So we did that. Now, obviously, my first year was off a COVID year. So that was super weird. So I didn't get to my kids. We didn't have a spring, didn't have a summer. And then just like we had camp, wasn't a preseason game. We just right straight into week 1. So I installed during the season. Um, I hated every second of it. I mean, we installed like under one, which was like a base thing for us, like week 7. I mean, it was rough. So I was like, this is sucky. So I asked a bunch of college coaches, like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? And they're like, we pretty much install like 80% of our defense on spring, go over it again in summer, and go over it again during fall camp. So that's the approach that I took. Whereas a lot of guys in spring, especially in Florida, you get a full live game. A lot of guys will go, we're going to go super base and vanilla because it's spring. We're going to get fundamentals. We're going to do our stands and yada, 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 yada. I said, nah, we're going to install the entire thing. And we're just going to run, even if it feels like a little bit of a rush, we're going to get through everything. And we're going to try to run everything on that Friday night. I want to see them. I want to see under one. I want to see type 4. I want to see our fire zones and our creepers and yada, yada, yada. I want to see it all. And we're going to get through it all in spring. So we do a 2-week install. And a lot of that is feel. A lot of that is, how much do your kids remember from the year before? How many kids are you returning? All that stuff. So some things you are going to go through really fast. Some things you're not. Our cover 1 stuff we flew through this year. Um, in our 2 read, we like struggled with in the beginning of this year, which is our base. We played a ton of 2 read. It's always worse when you do that first 7-on-7 in spring and you're running 2 read and the kids don't switch. You're like, oh my God, we're going to lose every game this year. We're horrible. I'm a horrible defensive coordinator. And then after 10 snaps, they figure it out. And you're like, okay, I'm good again. But I think it took us 2 or 3 days still. Yeah, it took us 2 or 3 days still to get through 2 read. Yeah. So I made like this super cool, and I've had a couple guys ask me this, like, can I see your install calendar? And I'm like, I'll give it to you, but I didn't go by it. I've never gone by it. I've never accomplished going by. Hopefully I'm not like the defensive coordinator at Ohio State because I would look like a dummy because I'd have a GA, Visio, some super cool calendar, and just would completely like throw it out the window after the first day. That's pretty much what I did. Yeah, I can send a calendar, but I didn't go by it. A lot of it was by feel, just as long as we got through everything. Now, I didn't worry too much about personnel packages. So we didn't run our peso personnel package in spring. We did run our big personnel or sumo personnel package, 4-down stuff. Then we reinstall during the summer, and you get a lot of time with 7-on-7, and you can kind of slow install it. You don't get all the kids though, because 15 kids are on vacation and all that. And then during fall, we 1-week install. We fly through it, and I really want to narrow in the personnel packages. Everything, all the adjustments, we'll fly through it. And if there's a kid who's new, he has to catch up, and we kind of tell him he has to catch up, whether that's Zoom calls or him studying his brains out, whatever it is. And if he wants to start, he has to know that, we're kind of like, if you don't know yet, you're getting left behind. That's just, it is what it is. Yeah. So we 1-week install during fall. And I did not install anything new really during the season, some adjustments. We messed around with some bigs on same side fronts and things like that, but nothing like where we ran 80% of the time on our Friday night.
Okay. No, I mean, that's interesting. I think that's always an interesting conversation to have with coaches in general. Now I also want to hit on practice because I mean, I'm becoming OCD on that. There's got to be better ways to do things. I had a conversation with the regional final. I talked to a lot of people today. I'm just going to, I'm not trying to just like name drop people here. But I did talk to a state semifinal coach today about practice and how, hey, he's like, I will not be on the field more than 2 hours ever. It will not happen. And he's like, after the first day of contact, they don't have contact in practice again. They're shoulder pads and shorts after their first tackle day. I was like, okay. So how do you approach practice from a circuit, drills, group? What do you spend a lot of time doing? I know some coaches that love the sitting team. I know other coaches that love group work instead. How do you approach that aspect of yours? Oh, and how much did that change from your year 1 where you're pretty much learning as you go, really.
Yeah.
Year two, where you're like, okay, this is what we need to do to improve. This is what I did wrong the year before.
Yeah, and this will be really dependent on how big of a school you're at. If you have a JV program, if your JV program runs your stuff, all of that is important about it affects how you practice. This is coming from a small school coach that had like a staff of four and had 30 kids that go both ways and all that jazz. I don't get pre-practice. I don't get a weird period during the day that I can like coach my kids or anything like that. It's a struggle to get the kids out at 3:30 like on time and to practice until 5:30. So I'm a 2.5. We went about 2.5 hours, and then we would shorten it as the season went on. A lot of it is dependent on, I think, your kids, what they can handle, how much ball they've played. So, like, none of our kids have played Pop Warner. When we get them in fall, it's the first time they've ever tackled a human being in their entire life. So, they just haven't had the reps. Whereas some schools I know, they're at a public school, all their kids have tackled before. They've all played Pop Warner and things like that. So it's a little bit different. So you kind of have to pace it by the kids. Now, we would go shells and helmets on Monday. And that would kind of give the time for us to throw in our wrinkles. The offense would install a bit. And also, let me preface this on if I did install anything new, I would install it during the Sunday voiceover so I didn't have to talk about it on Monday. So our install period on Monday was like 30 seconds long. It was like we would line up and be like, everyone listen to voiceover, you had to. Does everyone understand what our new install is? They would all say yes. I would go, all right, if we mess it up, this is on you now. Usually we wouldn't mess it up because it wasn't a bunch of brand new concepts that we had done. And it was kind of hashed out on Sunday, which was another nice thing that we did during the voiceovers. So Monday was kind of light. It was kind of an install day. We would still hit and things like that. We would obviously hit more early on in the season when you're still trying to establish an air of physicality and how to tackle and things like that. How we did it was Coach Vince at Fordham. We kind of did his tag, tuck, and thud tempos. So we would do that during fall camp. So Monday would typically be and then we would also add live. We would go live on Tuesdays, pretty much all the way down to the ground. So Monday would be like a thud tempo. Tuesday would be a live for most periods. We would run a tackle circuit, whole shebang, not Oklahoma drills or anything where they're like eyes closed, facing backwards, doing a handstand, and then had to hit each other in a line of 4 people. And it was like a mosh. We did do that. We also didn't have any soft tissue injuries this year. We didn't have any concussions during practice. We didn't have any injuries. It's actually the healthiest football team I've ever seen in my entire life. We did have a new strength and conditioning coordinator that came in. I think he had a big thing to do with that. But the hitting drills and everything like that, tackling, we didn't have anything get rolled up under. And a lot of it was explaining when you install the tempo or the tackling tempo, you have to reiterate to the offense and defense that they have to take care of each other. I would tell the offense, and I would go like, look, if you spear my all-star middle linebacker and he's going easy on you, we will line up and I will let him hit you. Like you won't want to, you won't do it. So he's gonna take care of you because if he doesn't, I'm gonna chew his butt out. You take care of him. Now you can like juke the piss out of him. You can put a spin move, double B move, like jump cut, make him look goofy. I don't care, but do not put your head down and run through him. Take care of your kids. If you're running mesh and you see a receiver go over the middle, don't line them up. So we would take care of our kids that way. Wednesday would be a thud tempo day again, and then Thursday we would either do thud tempo early on in the year or we go tag tempo. Now that changed as the season went on. Like week 8 through 11, we were pretty much tag and tuck all 4 days. So it really just depended. We had 3 Thursday night games, so we didn't go live during those weeks. But it's kind of how we did it. Now, as far as like practicing with a small team, we would do, I think Monday offense would get 3 or 4 periods. We would get 2 or 3. Tuesday would be our live day, so we would get the extra period, and then Wednesday the offense would get it, and Thursday we would split it in half. Typically, what that looked like was an individual, like a 15-minute, 12-minute individual, then an inside run or a 7-on-7 or both, and then a team to finish. Kind of just traditional stuff. Nothing crazy, but I'm fine with being a little physical, especially at a small school. like I said, that I've never learned a tackle or blocked a structure or anything like that. It was necessary. We didn't have a JV as well, so these kids have never learned any of that.
Okay. Now I want to hit on 4 more quick topics. First, I mean, obviously you've kind of talked about what your off seasons looked like and how to kind of improve. Obviously this off season is a little different for you with you getting married and moving. But I mean, is there anything even with that process happening? Anything you're looking at? Anybody you're studying? Obviously, Aranda's have a big influence on you. Me and you talked a little bit, Jim Knowles, before we started recording this. Is there anything you're kind of looking at or studying, or you're just interested in learning more about?
I have always wanted to like marry the Aranda front seven run stopping stuff with like Saban TCU quarters. That's kind of like what I've always dreamt of. So I had to like learn. There's a whole process to learning those types of things. You got to learn the language and what two read is called. It's like for two read and Aranda's, it's called nail, and I think for like Saban it's called clamp, and I think for TCU it's called blue. So you have to like write a glossary just to understand them, look at the playbook, and understand what the crap is going on. So probably that. We didn't run a ton of cover three just because I wasn't comfortable coaching it. I think I talked about this today, but so I'm kind of studying three match and rip Liz, things like that, because it wasn't necessary to have. We would have to turn all of our 5 and 6 man pressures into cover one pressures. It's kind of a pain, kind of made for some wonky rolls, but we did it. We did it. We didn't run much cover three unless it was like fire zone coverage. So that's another thing that I'm studying. And then I have a feeling that I may just be a position coach, just getting married. So like I'm going to narrow down on the inside linebackers are my passion. So I'm going to kind of narrow down, be that overly anal position coach that just like knows everything. I love those guys. Like Ross, the DB guy on Twitter. Like every time he talks about DBs, I'm just like, dude, that dude's awesome. I want to be like that guy. Like everyone knows that position coach that's like, dude, why aren't you a head coach somewhere? And he's like, I just want to coach O-line. Like it's everything to me. It's all I care about. So that might be me. That might be me this year. It's just been like, I just coach inside backers. I don't care about overarching scheme or concepts or anything like that. I just want to coach. All I care about is positive shin angle and hand placement. That's the only thing I care about. So I might be that guy this season as well. We'll just see how it goes.
Well, a year from now, you can come back on and we can label podcasts shin angles and hand placement. So that is and you're right. Like we all know that guy who should be, or maybe wants to be someday, but they're just so focused on their position group and how good they are. That's what kind of makes it interesting. You mentioned your kind of interest in two read and kind of where that goes. Why was that one of your interesting coverages that you're kind of into? Just obviously there's the Nick Saban Rip Liz match. There's the man cover one. There's country coverages, but why two read?
Two things, and one, this is kind of a cop out, but it's important. I think if you're going to a new place, it was already kind of installed. Now it wasn't great when I came in, but it was their base coverage. So I think whenever you go to a new place, and I'm planning on doing this if I go into a new place and I have to run the defenses, what did they do the year before? Like, what can I steal from? What can I keep the same? Because, worst case scenario, you're going into a new place. And, I would never try to install the entire system in 1 year. I don't think I would. Actually, I probably would, but I would regret it, I think. You got to try and steal some concepts. If they're running rip Liz, like it's a good coverage. So just run the coverage. Even if you don't know it, then learn it. Then learn the coverage, take a month and learn it, ask questions about it, and then, run with it in season. And that'll kind of like keep you buoyant while you also install your stuff. So wherever I go, I'm planning on kind of doing the same thing. We'll also like put my spin in it. Like we'll probably still run Type 4 or Wizard 4. And then what else? What other stuff? I don't need all the personal packages. But when it comes to two read, one, it was already installed. And then two, it's really good into bubbles. And that was the number one thing, is when teams were throwing, it wasn't like some air raid passing attack. It was really cheap stuff. We had a couple RPO teams, but they really only ran stick or bubble out of it, mostly bubble. But we had bubble was our second thrown concept my first year. My third, this past year, I think it was like their second or third most thrown concept the year I was coming in. So teams were just throwing bubble all the way down. So obviously, hammering down the bubble in two reads, that was a really big thing. Um, it was something that a lot of times would take away like half of the team's passing attack. Would take it's really great into RPOs. It's pretty good into um, forwards. So that was the number one concept we saw year to year, especially to a two-man side was forwards and bubbles. Like that's almost all we saw, and that's what two read is great on because you're obviously carrying 4/4 into forwards, and then you're hammering the bubbles. So it covered almost like 2/3 of what we were going to see passing attack wise, um, and it was already installed. So both of those things kind of helped.
Okay. And then before we start wrapping up, I did this once, probably a handful of times, and I want to do it a little bit more. And like I use Coach Vass's example all the time because we talked soccer for like 10, 15 minutes. Do you have any other passions, anything else you're interested? Like Vass's get away is obviously soccer. I mean, like I said, that's what we talked about. Every coach is a little different on that. What is your kind of getaway?
Um, I still like. I'm only 25. I play video games with my friends. That's what I like. Just got the new Halo, so like I got the gaming headset on now. It's probably what I'll go do right after this because I'm sitting down at my computer. So playing video games with my friends. A lot of my friends we don't live next to each other or anything like that. So it's the same way to kind of connect. We're able to talk for an hour or two and just goof off like old times. And then I'm starting a business, so that takes a large portion of my time. I enjoy, leadership and businesses and it's really kind of the same field to me. I've always said that head coaches, high school head football coaches, would be the best small business owners because there's a lot of transition in between them. The leadership aspect, the organizational aspect. Even as a coordinator, like the top down conceptual stuff, it's kind of a lot of the same thing. I enjoy that sort of work. So a little bit of both of those things, and then my fiance keeps me busy as well. So I'm sure there will be many things. I've been told by married men that I will have many things to do when I get married. So we'll see how it goes.
Now, I do realize I did, and I apologize because I did accidentally skip one thing on here. I want. Can you talk about your Twitter real quick because I mean it has become a small gold mine over the past I don't know couple weeks. I don't know if it's because you're not. I mean you're looking for a job. I don't know if it's because of your move. I don't know what it is, but like daily I just see you ask questions. And that's what I love. You're asking questions and then there's 18,000 responses from either you or other people or I just personally think it's a gold mine. And then you drop some clips here and there and drawings and like so what has kind of been the I don't know how I want to word this movement to ask questions and pose ideas
Yeah.
on Twitter lately?
Well, starting out, I'm in my Twitter account like 2019. It was like right when I got the job. I was going into my first year. I was asking questions because I needed to know. Like I didn't know anything. I needed to know. I knew what I knew as a player, and that obviously doesn't translate perfectly. So I needed to know. And one thing that I've learned is that coaches love to talk and love to hear themselves talk. So it's a really easy engagement tool. Asking questions to football Twitter is the easiest thing in the world because everyone thinks they're Nick Saban. I love all of you, but everyone thinks they're Nick Saban. So I love talking ball. And then, just kind of being vulnerable. A lot of times, I'll still ask questions about two read. I've been running it for 2 years. I've heard just about every clinic there is to hear on it, but I still like to ask questions because even though, even if you think you know something, a lot of times there's a better way to run it or a different wrinkle or whatever it is, even to your base stuff. So even if it's questions that I kind of think I know the answer to, I still like asking. So, my goal was really to try, and I do a question of the day, try and get one question every day. Just one question. It doesn't have to be a scheme thing, could be a coaching philosophy thing, could be a culture thing, could be just a silly question, but one question a day. So I try to leave the day learning one thing. Now a lot of times it's way more than one thing because I get pretty good responses. I get like 20 responses or more, and then I learned five things. And there you go. I learned five things for that day. So definitely use Twitter as like kind of a tool and a weapon to learn instead of just paying for clinics. I'd pay for Twitter 100 times over than going to a Nike clinic or something like that. They're the clinics are great to engage in and kind of be part of a community, but you can pretty much learn everything you want from Twitter if you ask the right questions. That's a really important part that a lot of people miss, though. I've been getting more and more questions, and it's kind of hard because I learned this early on. You have to ask, and this being a podcaster, you have to ask pointed questions and certain questions. You can't go to a guy and go, "Hey, real quick in the DMs, can you tell me about your base defense?" Like, dude, I could talk about my base defense for 12 hours if I had to. Like, that's a really hard question to answer. But if you go to a guy like Vass or Cody Alexander or the plethora of genius coaches on Twitter and you ask them very pointed questions, a lot of times you'll get very pointed answers, and it leads into a whole thread. There's a thread today of talking about carrying 2 or 3 vertical with an inside backer. That wouldn't that's not my world. I'm not a middle field close coverage guy. Like, I don't run cover 3, but learned a ton from that. So using it as a tool that way as well. And then, also you still have to be a human being. So be vulnerable. I used to joke that when I got 5,000 followers, I was going to turn my Twitter account to a food Twitter account. And I did it for like a month. Like I just like posted food lists for like a month and a half. I might do it again if I get bored this off season. Another thing, coaches love food. So, be yourself, be vulnerable. Vulnerability is probably the number one thing that I can tell coaches on Twitter is, there's no point in having an ego. It's okay to say that you're wrong or ask a dumb question if you don't know. Twitter is not real life. Just be yourself, be vulnerable. And a lot of times that comes through. Like, be very, 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 very genuine. The kids will always know when you're not genuine, and smart coaches will also always know when you're not genuine. It shows. I'm not going to be constantly posting about like rah culture stuff because it's not me. I'm not gonna tweet at 5 a.m. that I'm listening to a Jocko podcast and hitting leg day. Like, it'd be a lie. Like, it's just not me. I like joking instead. I would much rather make fun of offensive line coaches than post them like, here, go get them today, rah. That's just not me. So be genuine, be yourself, ask great questions, pursue mentors, all that sort of stuff, and we'll kind of jump ahead of people pretty fast.
Yeah, no, I get you 100%, and that's kind of what people don't realize is how much prep work I put into this. And like, I mean, some are easier than others because I know, like, okay, I want to talk about this. Like, I knew, like with you, I didn't want to talk to tight front because you've talked it 8,000 times. Like, it's great, but I want to ask about off-season game planning, play calling, just a miscellaneous things of defensively that from an off-season standpoint. And it's kind of like, I mean, same thing with Vass. I didn't want to get pointed in like to read. I wanted to get into other topics. And then some coaches, when I ask them, like, if I've talked to them, like, is there anything specific you want to talk about? They'll give me something. And then I do a bunch of research on X, Y, Z. It's like, so I get your percent. Coach, just chill right there for a minute. And then let me do my outro. Then we'll talk real quick once I get this stopped. Coaches, thanks for listening as normal. Check out sponsors, affiliates, all that stuff below in the thing. Obviously, there should be an intro video for that, some of that stuff too. Now, make sure you follow Coach on Twitter. His Twitter will be in the bio. Depending on when he makes a decision, his updated home may be in there as well. If not, again, Twitter, that'll probably get updated there as well. Other than that, thank you again for supporting the channel. Like, share, subscribe, all that lovely stuff is normal. And that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.